UVA Darden.
Good Disruption, a lively discussion between UVA Darden School of Business professors Yael Grushka-Cocaine and Mike Lennox on cutting-edge technologies and practices that are challenging the status quo.
Hello, Yael.
Hey, how are you, Mike?
How are you doing on this fall day?
I am doing great. One of my two favorite seasons of the year.
Oh, what's your other favorite season?
Spring, obviously.
Not summer?
No, definitely not summer. I'm a spring person. I do actually like maybe all three seasons but summer.
Really?
I really like the heat. Yeah.
Okay. And the wife and I have this debate all the time. We're actually summer people. We love going to the beach and the ocean and everything. Yeah. The winter's always last.
I love the winter.
Do you?
Love it. Yeah.
Do you ski?
Nope, I don't, but I like cuddling on the sofa with a hot cup of
I
coffee.
like that.
Yeah.
Do you like our winters where we get like 2, snowstorms per year in Charlottesville?
I like it.
Okay, that's good. That's good. I like winter up until like New Year's, and then I'm done.
And then you're done with it.
Yeah,
That's fair.
One of the great things here in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Central Virginia is we tend to get spring like the beginning of March, so it kind of is nice.
We actually have 4 seasons, and they're all pretty equally sized, so I think we're pretty lucky.
We are. I lived in Boston for a while, and the joke there was no spring. It just went right into winter.
I lived in London for 7 years, and it's just
rainy seasons there.
rain, and more rain.
Yeah. Well, hey, while we're on the topic of favorite seasons, when you were a child in the summertime, maybe the spring or the fall, did you ever have a flying toy of some sort?
Good question. What, like one of those like remote control kind of?
Exactly. Yeah.
We had our.
It was a lot of fun, or.
I don't know. I think I preferred the more static toys, but yes, we had our fair share.
Well, I don't know about, I don't know if I really had many when I was growing up, other than like a kite was the extent of the technology. But I do remember with my kids, when they were younger, my kids are, as you know, older now. Yeah. I felt like we bought them drones for like 3 years running, and it was the best 24 hours you had before it would completely either be destroyed or run into a tree.
Got one for my son one year for the holidays, and I think the drone is still sitting in our closet somewhere. And my husband likes, he used to do a lot of paper airplanes when he was young.
Cool.
So he and his dad used to do a lot of that. So I think that he was hoping that he and my son would engage in that, but it didn't really live that long, last that long.
Well, the reason I wanted to ask this is because I want to talk about drones today.
Yes, great topic. I've just been watching 2 episodes of Ozark where drones play a pretty big role in Ozarks.
Yeah. So let me start with asking a question. This is kind of my cold call question for you. Okay. What is a drone?
Ooh,
what do you imagine?
An unmanned aerial vehicle?
Oh, that's excellent. You did your homework. You knew this coming in. Yeah.
Ironically, this is not, as it's not that unusual in this conversation that we have in our show, that the technology itself is not all that new. So drones have been around for a while.
Well, in fact, all the way back to 1918,
Crazy.
None other than Orville Wright of the Wright brothers, inventors of air travel, if you will, they had something called the Kittering bug. It was Orville Wright and Charles Kittering in 1918 as the first UAV. So
what they were thinking the use case would be then, because it probably has changed quite a bit in terms of today's use case for drones.
I'm not sure, but you could imagine it may even been similar in terms of like deliveries and the like there. I think one of the important distinctions we need to make right away is that these UAVs, these drones, there are kind of 2 flavors of them. And the second flavor I'll mention is kind of growing in importance.
Yeah.
So the first is unmanned, but often controlled by a human directly. And I think that's what most of the drones that we've seen in our own lives and experience are of that type.
Have some kind of remote control, some kind of device, or maybe your phone these days, where you can actually guide this toy to float around, fly around. You can control its height. You can control where it goes and where it lands.
Yeah, but to be clear, we're going to talk more about this. Some of these toys, like those being deployed by the military, there may be somebody sitting here in Central Virginia, controlling a drone halfway around the world,
of
right?
Course. Yeah.
But the second type of drone, if you will, are those that are becoming increasingly autonomous. And so we've talked about AI repeatedly on this podcast. AI is coming in this world as well. So we're seeing more and more of these more autonomous drones that are able to function without the human controller as well come out.
And that seems like a natural combination or extension, if you will, of what we talked about in terms of cars, right? So you had your autonomous vehicles, and why not have autonomous aerial devices and airplanes and the like?
So, we talk a lot about S-curves. And, if you go back to 1918 to where we are today, this has been a long S-curve with this technology. But it does feel like we're at this inflection point in terms of the improvement. So just give you some examples here. You might remember like when our kids had drones, I don't know about you, it would be like 20 minutes of entertainment, and then you'd have to charge it up again. Battery life. So now with extended batteries that we have today, over 4 hours, depending on the use case and the like that you might get out of your drone. Distance as a result, much, much further. And related to that, depending if it's a, remote controlled drone, utilizing 5G networks and the like, so you can go very far. Because it also used to be the case, and I think that's why they only lasted 24 hours at my home, is if it got too far away, you'd lose control and it would crash into a tree or the like. They're also being fitted with more cutting edge sensors and cameras now, including thermal and LiDAR and all of these sophisticated ways to map your world here. So what they can do for us and what they can show us is becoming more and more sophisticated there. And then the last piece I would add, and this fits into a kind of our AI integration piece here, we're thinking of ways in which we deploy multiple drones in concert with one another. So have you ever seen one of these drone light shows?
No, yes, I have. I think we maybe you saw here at New Year's at UVA. There was a beautiful, beautiful one.
I missed that. The other one, and this will be funny for anyone who lives in Charlottesville, there's something called the Winter Wander that they run at the Borside Resort, and now they have a drone show. So if you've ever seen one of these, literally thousands of drones working in concert with one another to form objects in the sky. I mean, it's quite amazing compared to, again, what we were used to growing up with like fireworks displays and the like.
And just again, going back to your initial idea around like definitions here. So when does a drone no longer become a drone, but you're talking about like autopilot kind of flying a plane? Like, how do we distinguish between them? Just the fact that there are no humans on it, or is there another way to think about it?
Yeah, and I think I'll give you an example where it's getting even more conflated here. So I think in general, the definition would be there's no human on board. However, there are entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, as they always are, who are working on quadcopters, which is often what our popular imagination of what a drone is these days, where you have like 4 helicopter blades to kind of give you the lift, that they're building much larger to transport humans. But to be clear, they're still unmanned in that you, as the person in the quadcopter, are not actually controlling it. Lots of interesting questions of whether you would trust an unmanned vehicle that is flying to take you from point A to point B. But as we've talked in this podcast before, lots of people are doing this on automobiles now with Waymo and Tesla and others offering AV services. Would you ever do that, you think? Would you ever?
Oh, I don't know. I'm still debating. Waymo's coming to DC very shortly, and I'm still on the fence. I think that people have convinced me that it's pretty safe these days and probably safer than most cars.
You must be a pretty comfortable flyer, I'm imagining.
Pretty comfortable.
Oh, yeah. Comfortable.
Comfortable. I've gotten, I think, less comfortable as I've grown older, but in general, it's kind of the maternal kind of instinct kicks in a little bit there.
I get that. I'm one who can like fall asleep in the worst of turbulence.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah, I don't know.
I used to be better, but I'm no longer.
Yeah, I can usually do pretty well. Even saying that, I'm not sure if I'm ready to get into an unmanned quadcopter to take me off. Well, this is obviously a podcast often focused on markets. So let's put some numbers to what's happening here.
Please. And I have some follow-up questions too.
Sure. So most recent year, the market was valued at about 42.6 billion, so US dollars. So that's a fairly large size, but it's projected to grow to about 122 billion by 2032. So we're talking about 12 and a half 14% growth rate over the next few years, compound annual growth rate here.
And is it mostly the use case? Is it mostly growth around the delivery services, the Amazons of the world?
I'm so glad you asked that. So I think many of us kind of common citizens think about the idea of delivery, and that is something we want to talk about here. But it's far more diverse than that. So clearly, there's a whole military application, and there's numerous companies rising to deploy drones at scale for warfare. And we should talk more about that.
And it's actually already changing warfare, as we know.
Dramatically changing warfare. The second is areas like agriculture.
Okay.
And what we might call precision agriculture, using the drones for information purposes, and then sometimes for delivery of like seeds and for water, and to really improve the efficacy of agriculture. So that's been a big change.
What about supervising and watching over the animals and kind of providing some additional services?
Exactly. That's that information that you can collect from up in the air versus on the ground. There was an interesting article recently, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, talking about migration of antelope in Africa that had never really been fully tracked because it was just nearly impossible to do so. And they deployed drones that then, I think, autonomously was counting the number of animals. And so again, there's some really interesting, use cases for even science that we're seeing here.
Although having spent a couple weeks in the summer in Tanzania in the Serengeti, I'm very glad that I didn't have to hear drones hanging over me when I was in the middle of the Serengeti, and I could only watch the migration.
Well, and this is one of the things, we definitely want to talk about as we consider good, bad, or no disruption here is, what are some of the downsides? So you mentioned one, which is noise. I had a similar experience. We were actually at the beach, sitting there, a beautiful sunset over the sound, and all of a sudden, bzzz, and it was only like 30 feet above me. Someone, a neighbor, I assume, had pulled out their drone to take a picture of the sunset, and it was a little bit of a buzzkill. A little bit of a buzzkill.
Literally,
I think another big one, especially with private use of these drones, is privacy. Because these could be flying over your home. There are various rules and regulations being put in place, but as you can imagine, this is very hard to manage and regulate.
What about the FAA and how do they feel, or any airspace controller? How do they feel about the invasion and sharing the airspace? Until now, it's been pretty limited to whatever they regulate and allow. So how do they feel about
and I think this is a huge
traffic
issue
jams in the sky
that needs to be resolved, and there's been progress, and there's still more progress that needs to be made on what is allowed and not allowed. Clearly, we've restricted the use of these around certain sensitive areas, including, of course, airports, but also military installations and the like. But they've had any number of instances where drones have been found, like going over sensitive military areas. I imagine there are companies who have to worry about this, of going over sensitive, private areas that they have. And so this management of drones is, clearly a huge issue. Well, let's talk quickly about some of the sectors.
Okay, good. And also, I'm keen to hear, where do you think the exciting use of drones is coming from? What can we look forward to?
Well, so first, let's talk about military.
Yeah.
Just dramatically has changed the nature of warfare. Their deployment, especially in the Ukraine war, has been game-changing, I think it's fair to say.
The Middle East as well.
Yeah, and I think, that has a lot of concerns about, again, how easy it is to engage in war. And as I've heard some of the military say, the age of big metal, like where we have big tanks and big aircraft carriers, might be rendered moot by drones who can, at scale swarm. And my understanding in Ukraine, these are just commercial drones that you could, buy for your kids that they're redeploying to be used as military vehicles.
That really kind of is pretty bleak and scary in the sense that it implies that somebody can engage in warfare without having as much at stake in some ways. And that's that's dangerous. Like I can see that that's a slippery slope.
Yeah, and I want to get back to this. And we're going to bring our expert in here in a little while. I want to talk about that.
Questions around that.
Yeah, but let's talk a little bit again about agriculture. Again, everything from crop monitoring, livestock monitoring, even crop spraying that could be done there. So again, these are finding heavy deployment there. And then let's talk about the third one, which I think is the one maybe the most fun for people, which is commercial delivery.
Okay.
So way back in 2013, it was almost over a decade ago, Amazon with Jeff Bezos on 60 Minutes, the television show, famously released this video of drone delivery.
Yes.
And again, it's often with technologies we've talked about, it was a little ahead of its time. Like I think all of us were thinking, oh, this is coming next week. And like, no. But a decade later, it is coming and it is being deployed. So just some examples here. In Australia, DoorDash has been using drones for several years now to get out to rural areas.
Yeah.
China, maybe not surprising, has been a heavy adopter of these, using them for a variety of different areas.
And cities in the U.S.
And in the U.S., we're beginning to see some experiments now in California and Texas and Arizona. So the FAA has given some permission to operate these drones beyond the pilot's line of sight. So again, this idea that they can go much further using the sensors to tell them where they are. Some of these are with Walmart, DoorDash. One of the big companies that's kind of interesting entering the space is Zipline, which has this cool technology where instead of landing the drone to deliver the package, it stays high up and then has a zip line that drops the
zip
line that drops the package, or slowly, I guess, puts the package down on the ground for you. So again, I wouldn't say this is obviously at scale, but there are commercially viable models now being brought to the market of drone delivery.
So if I'm in the midst of cooking and I realize that I'm out of eggs, I can then hop onto Walmart's website and order a drone to deliver me the eggs.
Maybe, depending on where you are, there's one of these pilot areas.
Make it to my house, not broken.
Well, and I think the answer is yes from a technological standpoint, but as often with new technology, the underlying economics, right? Like when does it make sense to do this? And when is this, it doesn't make sense for your eggs to be delivered via drone.
Right. Or maybe I'll pay a high premium in order to cover the additional delivery cost, maybe.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think those are the types of dynamics that are going to need to be worked out. You think it's time to bring in our expert?
Yes, I have many, many more.
I was going to say, I definitely think it's time to bring in our expert. That was about it. That's all I got on my knowledge on drones. Well, we're really excited to have with us Mark Hahn. Mark is majority of his career has been as a naval aviator flying aircraft carrier-based tactical jets. So
he knows something.
He knows manned aviation, but he also knows some things about other ways in which we can deploy in the military. In particular, he's earned multiple air medals for combat operations over Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. He's provided electronic attack support for Allied ground forces. And then he pivoted. As we often see, he came to Darden, got his MBA back in 2020, and joined Zipline, the company I was just mentioning there, based out of San Francisco. He has held several roles there, primarily engineering program management and leading global operations strategy and planning. So he knows it both from the military side, but also from the commercial side. So we are so excited to have you with us here today, Mark.
Well, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
It's nice to meet you, Mark, and thank you for taking the time. How lucky are we that we have such an expert in our community?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Mark, let's start maybe with the military side of things here. Can you tell us a little bit, just where is the state of warfare using drones? And I know it's a fast-moving space here, but what's your general sense of it?
You mentioned the war in Ukraine. I mean, we're seeing the drones basically taking over the battlefield strategy there, and as you also mentioned, these are not like what we're typically used to seeing in the military industrial complex in the U.S. So they're not multi-million-dollar drones. These are drones that cost on the order of hundreds of dollars to build. So therefore, you're seeing proliferation, the ability to deploy these things at scales that really haven't been seen before, I would say, in conventional warfare for the amount of range and the amount of capabilities that they actually have. I think it really turned a lot of people in the military kind of opened their eyes to a completely new dynamic on the battlefield, and something that we're going to have to adjust to. we've seen it in, in Ukraine that our current systems, both offensive and defensive, but um, mainly on I think the defensive front, aren't really designed for that kind of warfare. I mean, we're utilizing Patriot missile batteries to shoot down, $100 drones, and it's just it's unsustainable in the long term if it continues to go in that route. So I think the military is scrambling right now to catch our own capabilities up to what we're seeing being employed in Ukraine, but from the ability to deploy them ourselves, as well as the ability to defend them in a manner that scales and is not cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
I'm curious, as a former jet pilot in the Navy, and as most Americans, my whole knowledge of this world is the
Top Gun. Yeah, I know. You know.
But in the Top Gun Maverick, obviously one of the themes, if you will, or underlying currents, was the idea that the age of the fighter jet pilot is going to go away, and all we're going to have is autonomous vehicles, autonomous drones, and the like. What are your thoughts on that? Is the age of the fighter pilot done with this, or are we going to see more still have need, I guess, for the fighter pilot?
Well, I should also before I answer this question, I should let you know that I would jokingly be considered a traitor by many of my former colleagues by going to the unmanned drone, or excuse me, unmanned aircraft sector. But and unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because it is, I have such fond memories of that time in my life, and it is for me, it was the best career in the world. Unfortunately, I do think there's an end in sight to it. And the reason for that is that the capability of drones to operate in the areas we want to, and the ease of deployment is much easier. And then be more on a technological aspect. The things you need to do to put a person in an aircraft increase both the complexity of the systems involved. You have to have ejection seats, displays, readouts, space for the person, onboard oxygen, climate control systems, things like that, which ultimately increases the cost of those aircraft, as well as the radar cross section is another big thing. So the bigger something is, the farther away it can be seen by radar systems, is a major factor in military planning. So as much as I hate to say it, I do think that we're looking at probably the last generation of manned tactical aviation, I would say.
Fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating to think of the world, of that future world, knowing I rest assured or have some confidence in humankind that we also can come up with a defense, the counter argument, which is, okay, we'll figure out how to defend ourselves from drones too. Like if we're going to substitute aircraft,
I'm optimistic.
But back to that, yeah. I actually want to pivot and maybe take a step back and kind of get a more positive or expand the use cases beyond the military kind of purpose. Part. What about, Mark, are you seeing, or is Zipline engaged in, and maybe it's not Zipline specifically, but the industry, are we talking about now reaching every part of the world? Like people who are suffering, or sometimes we have, people that are lost in various like accidents and so on. Like, is this changing the way that we can help humankind? Can we get medical equipment to, remote locations? Like, I'm thinking about all the things that we've been typically limited by. I feel like drones should make the world a smaller place as opposed to anything else, right?
Yeah. Well, Mark, if I understand, that's Zipline's story, right? How did Zipline get its start?
All right. I need to, this is an important clarification that I think is often missed, because Zipline does have a great story. But Zipline, a lot of people do talk about that. And Zipline's doing amazing things in Africa with their drone, their drone delivery. They've reduced, with their blood delivery systems they set up in Rwanda and Ghana. Those were the first two countries we served in Africa. they've reduced postpartum hemorrhaging by over 50% in both locations at the places they serve. So there are plenty of people walking around on this earth today because of that technology, which is just absolutely fantastic. But Zipline gets a lot of credit for being, this organization that's, delivering medicine to Rwanda and Ghana. An inside story from Zipline, and the founders have actually said this, so it's not any particular secret or anything. But Zipline actually the founders of Zipline started Zipline. Not it wasn't called Zipline at the time, but they originally set out to build a children's robotic toy, and that failed. And then they pivoted to drone delivery. So the idea that a group of people got together in a room and said, like, let's really fix this problem of postpartum hemorrhaging in sub-Saharan Africa that's not exactly how it happened. It happened, it did happen after Zipline was founded, and, they transitioned to drones. And that actually, that became a critical part of Zipline's history, because through people are more willing to bend aviation rules if you're saying, hey, we need this, this authorization, or we need this restriction lifted in order to fly these drones to save people, rather than like, hey, we need this restriction lifted, or we need a little wiggle room on these rules in order to deliver somebody a burrito.
Right.
So
Well, but look, that's very common for entrepreneurial stories. Is that you start with one thing and then you pivot and then you discover an opportunity or a challenge that you could solve, and then you go off to it. So I think that's a great story, actually, because I think we see that quite a bit with ventures. How about on the commercial side? How are things shaping out? As I mentioned, Yael, my impression is there are obviously a lot of these efforts out there by commercial entities. How profitable, how extensive, does this model work at this point?
Zipline's natural, since we just spoke about kind of like the blood delivery and the vaccine delivery, that works really, really well in Africa and hard to access spaces. But ultimately the company has their sights on the commercial drone delivery in the United States, and that is not necessarily blood deliveries. That's delivering those burritos and coffee and Tylenol and things like that. And there is certainly possibility for that, and I think there's a lot of benefits in doing that. You lose some of those like social good benefits, but there are very many reasons why drone delivery makes sense in the U.S., and that is, having a car deliver. Again, I keep on using the term or the example of a burrito, but it works pretty well. And Zipline recently signed a partnership with Chipotle, so burritos, I suppose, have been on my mind. But anyway, you think about a driver delivering a burrito, and it just is an incredibly inefficient means to get a burrito from the point of origin to the delivery point. Driving a 3,000-pound car. So I think the gains you see in being carbon reduction, in less wear and tear on infrastructure, in reduction in traffic. Those are real gains to be made, and really and the speed at which you're going to get it is going to be theoretically multiples faster. So I think it certainly does make sense in the U.S. and other parts of the world for to implement a drone system. With that, there certainly come challenges. However,
I like this because both of us, Yael and I, have an operations background, and the traveling salesperson problem, which is how do you effectively deliver a set of goods to especially a dense network of delivery points. And it just makes so much sense to me that you would actually want to mix, right? There might be homes in a more densely packed area where that truck delivery makes 100% sense. But then that person who lives a little further out. I think here in Charlottesville is a great example where we
Yeah.
have some density, but we also have some rural areas very close by. Optimizing that system is good, like you said, for infrastructure, for the environment, and the like.
Although it's interesting because I can imagine the next generation of models where it's like, because now you have to think of one drone that can carry less and how,
Yeah.
or multiple drones going in different destinations, and we're going to have to do the traveling drone, kind of route.
Professors in business, though, right? Trying to solve those complex.
We often ask on this show, Mark, like, what has changed? Why now? And maybe this is not just now. Maybe we've seen this on a steady increase. Maybe it's been kind of pretty constant and linear in fashion, or maybe we've seen some kind of huge growth recently. Like, is there something? Is it the AI with the battery, with the kind of additional sensoring? Is there other things going on in terms of the innovation here and the technology that is changing, that is allowing drones to become a real kind of viable business model?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I think like part of it certainly is technology. 20 years ago, you would have had to have, I think you would have certainly had to have one-to-one controller, meaning like you have one person controlling one drone, in order to do that, in order to actually like fly a drone around, and make a delivery, even if you were able to do that 20 years ago. Nowadays, the autonomy function of the drone, I think, is really where the scale and the advantage, the advantage lies there. Because drones share a lot of things with a delivery van. They share a lot of maintenance, upkeep. So there certainly is that. And then I think the other thing is kind of like the introduction of the Uber Eats DoorDash model was another pivotal point in
right.
in kind of realizing that drones were going to be the future, or could be the future here.
Yes.
And the validation of that model basically kind of set the blueprint for the business. So it's not exactly the same, but understanding that the consumer's expectations now for delivery it's almost immediate. Amazon, I think I read something a little while ago that said like we used to think of Amazon Prime's 2-day shipping as being like, wow, that's amazing. But Amazon now, they say like over 80% of their packages are delivered same day or faster than their 2-day.
I love that, by the way.
Yeah.
Somebody who doesn't like to shop, the idea that it's actually quicker for me to order it online and have it delivered than it would be for me to get in my car and go get it. To go shopping sometimes.
It's a big dilemma that we have at home. I think sometimes it's better to go out shopping, but
Some see shopping as a sport. I get it. That's just not who I am.
But I can see that this is also like one of the effects of COVID, interestingly, that we've totally changed how we view these types of services. And I think the rise in, the ride sharing and the food delivery and all of the likes is really changing how people the consumption of some of these goods.
Now, Mark, we started to talk about some of the downsides. I mentioned noise as one, the kind of the nuisance factor that these might create. There are concerns about safety. If one of these starts to drop out of the sky.
Privacy, you mentioned.
Privacy. Another one that I don't think we're there yet, but just congestion. Like, is this a worry? Are we going to have look up and all we're going to see are, hundreds of drones flying over our heads at any point in time? What are your thoughts on some of these challenges? Are we able to solve some of them? Are they overblown?
Yeah. No, I don't think I think they're overblown. I think they're real challenges, but I do think they're, they are solvable with the right amount of, regulation and technological, implementations. So I'm going to start with one that's kind of that I think about, that I don't sometimes may get lost in a lot of those noise and potential for mid-air collisions and other concerns. But we were just talking about the Uber Eats DoorDash model, and what we saw, I think, during the pandemic was a lot of small businesses kind of being forced to sign up for that model to keep up sales. And one of the big questions with drones, I mentioned the similarity, but one big difference is that you can imagine, you mentioned Chipotle. You can imagine Chipotle having the working capital to install whatever, or reserve space and design their stores in order to incorporate the space for for a drone. And I think one of the questions that I think about is how does a small business keep up with that? And I think that's a real question of will they have the capital and the ability to alter whatever sort of store mechanism it would be to to deliver that. So
By the way,
I'll start there.
I love that as a strategist. I love that idea that this question of will this technology cause more concentration,
Yes.
big platforms where everybody has to use the same platform to get their delivery, or could it actually have the opposite? Could it actually empower the small business, the end retailer, to not have to go through a DoorDash or an Uber Eats?
And
That's fascinating.
It's fascinating. One of our faculty here that maybe we'll introduce you to, Mark, Polina Feldman, she does her work on exactly that. Like, what is the cost to those small businesses? That the Uber Eats were introduced as an option to expand your market and service people that are at home. But actually, at the end of the day, when you look at all the fees and everything, the restaurants lose money.
Right.
Yeah.
These other businesses.
I can see the concern for small businesses, Mark, for sure.
Yeah, and the other downside to that, and I can speak to this as I've driven for Uber Eats before. I'm not afraid to admit it. There is job loss there. I wouldn't say it was particularly, it's not like a high quality job or anything like that, but there is that side of it, too. But going back to the other thing about, your other point about downsides is, yeah, certainly, you mentioned before privacy, and I think of privacy as kind of like one of the, and perhaps, I'm insensitive to this, but I don't really buy the whole privacy argument, because if you're going to get something delivered to your house, whether it be via a delivery driver or a ground-based robot or a UAV, and the thing is either going to have, eyes, cameras, or, something to know where it's going and deliver it. So
and your name and your address. Yes.
And your name and your address. Exactly. And, at that point, it's your choice whether you'd rather have a human there or or maybe it's your choice. Maybe you don't have a choice in the future. But if you choose to have something delivered to your house, you're basically, in my mind, signing an agreement that, somebody is going to put eyes, somebody or something is going to put eyes on your house in order to deliver that package. So
I can make the argument that it's safer then, right, than having a human who's coming by your house who you don't know, and
that's what I'm hearing from Mark's comment.
Yeah.
So
how about the noise and the nuisance part of this?
Yeah, I think this is a real big one for customer adoption and retention. And what Zipline has focused their particular system, which is kind of like this bigger drone thing, dropping the smaller, what we call droid out the bottom. And that's designed to keep a lot of the big noise way up high, or 200 feet above the house, and reduce that noise, because I think noise does end up being a real concern. I mean, people don't want to hear drones flying around all day. I will admit that I am personally annoyed by when I hear a drone kind of flying around. It's almost an unsettling feeling in me, thinking that somebody's watching me. So I think that Amazon had some problems with this in College Station with one of their earlier designs, and it had a lot of complaints about the noise, and it being basically perpetually sounding like a hive of bees, around people's houses. So Yeah, I think, solving the noise factor is going to be a major point.
Again, trying to pull out the optimist in me, but like I can imagine one day, maybe not our generation, but shortly after, or maybe, an intermediate generation, getting some solace from that noise, knowing that somebody's there to help you. Meaning, like, imagine like you're an elderly in your house on your own, and like something happens and you need help, right? Like, there's a way in which this helps us get immediate care to people much sooner. And so that you get some comfort knowing that the drone is there monitoring you. I don't know. Like, well, that may be a way to kind of think about where it could go.
When we have these technological transitions, we talk about the emergence of a dominant design that often comes as it becomes more
VHS, Beatum.
Yeah, that's a classic. The iPhone and things like that. It strikes me that we're still in the pre-dominant design phase with these drone delivery services. I think Zipline's a great example. It's a novel idea to have the drone up high and then a Zipline dropping the delivery pod, as you call it, or a droid down to you. Yeah. So I imagine that like some of these problems they'll wrestle through, and there'll be a dominant design that emerges that addresses them in whatever way society deems is appropriate at the end of the day. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate your insights here.
Such an expert on as I mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Didn't even get to mention it, but yeah, like obviously lots of regulatory issues and national security implications as well. So I'll just throw that
throw that one out there.
Open that Pandora's box before I leave. So thank you so much for having me.
All right, Yael, where do you stand?
Oh, it's a tough one for me. I can see the potentials, but I'm also kind of, if you ask me today, the fall of 2025, not to date the time that we're recording this episode, the weight of the state of the world, I can feel it like hanging over me and affecting my verdict, right?
Yeah.
The use case for the military and what we're seeing on the defense side concerns me a lot.
Yeah.
And so while I can see the potential there for it to offer good disruptions, right now I'm a little bit more in the negative side.
Just to push you a little bit on the military application, is it the drone per se, or is it the autonomy? If it was a bunch of autonomous robots who are walking across the field, maybe a humanoid robot.
Both. I think it's a little bit of both. I think the autonomous aspect of it, again, that lack of skin in the game, that is an incentive for countries to not engage in warfare, I think is really important, and we're struggling with that, quite frankly.
Turn effect.
Yeah.
Like you said, humans at risk.
Exactly. And the effect on civilians just far outstrips kind of things that we've seen in the past. And so, so right now I can see, and this is not the first time in history where new technology is first embraced by the military, and then there's regulation, as Mark mentioned, that kicks in and helps us put it to better use. And so I'm excited for those days to come.
Yeah.
But right now I'm pretty nervous.
Yeah. I'll start with the commercial side first, and that's where I'm probably more optimistic. Again, there are these downsides for sure that we'll need to navigate through. But I think this is actually, as Mark was alluding to, a heavily regulated environment, the airspace and air travel, at least in the United States. And so that gives me some hope that, this isn't going to go off the rails where, again, this future where all we see are drones everywhere. I think we'll figure that out. It will co-evolve the policy with the technology.
So maybe it's the AI inside the drones that you're more nervous about compared to the actual flight of the drones that is more regulated.
Well, no, I think it all works in concert with one another. And I think, again, it's not only the use cases of delivery, which again, I could see some use cases there. But again, as I mentioned, like agriculture, energy infrastructure, construction, like all of these areas where having a visual, aerial vision on some project and the like, and what that can do to help, mixed in with maybe machine learning algorithms to improve operations, that seems really appealing to me. And I don't see a ton of downsides to that. And so I guess on that side, I'm definitely pro. Or favorable. On the military, I'm with you. It's a scary world we're moving into.
Already living in.
And we're already living in. And I don't think it's hyperbolic to say like this is completely changing the nature of warfare. And where that ends, and like you said, like, does it remove restraints that we've had on engaging in military conflicts? That is worrisome. So what's your final verdict? You have to get good, bad, or no?
For the first time, well, maybe not for the first time, but I'm leaning towards the bad right now.
All right, I'm gonna play the good side.
Okay,
so this is like we've reversed roles from some of the things we did there. But I think the points you raise are really valid, and I think I guess it's imperative as the human race that we figure out these types of technologies and when they can be deployed and when it shouldn't be.
And organizations like Zipline and the like that are doing a lot of good with it and are being thoughtful and trying to kind of stay ahead of it to use it both commercially but also to do the great use cases. I think we need a lot of that to counteract it. And I'm hoping that we can get our act together on the military side too. But right now, I'm seeing a lot of negative.
All right. Well, again, we want to thank Mark, our special guest expert. As always, Gary, our producer, Becky, our lead researcher, Katie, our other researcher. We're expanding the team here.
It's fantastic.
Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Mike.
Good Disruption is a podcast from the University of Virginia Darden School of Business.
Darden.